I never thought I'd see the day my own father would look me dead in the eyes and tell me to do the right thing. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I refused to hand over the house I worked years to afford. My name's Nolan. I'm 31, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. Not weak, just the one who didn't want to stir the pot. My sister, Leah, was the opposite. She was the storm, loud, reckless, and somehow always painted as misunderstood. She could crash Dad's car, miss rent, or date the worst kind of people, and the family would still rush to comfort her like she was the victim of her own choices. Meanwhile, I could land a promotion or pay off a loan, and it'd barely get a nod. "That's what you're supposed to do," Dad would say. That was his way of keeping me humble, I guess. Growing up, Leah was always the golden child. She had this way of making every problem sound like someone else's fault, and Dad fell for it every single time. I used to think it was because she reminded him of Mom. Carefree, spontaneous, full of fire, before Mom passed when we were teenagers. But as I got older, I realized it wasn't that deep. Dad just liked being needed, and Leah made sure he felt that way. I didn't. I learned early on to handle things myself. By the time I was 18, I was already working 2 part-time jobs and saving every penny. Leah, meanwhile, was finding herself, which meant blowing through her allowance and calling home for help every week. When I bought my first home at 29, I didn't even tell my family right away. It was a modest 3-bedroom place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd worked for years to get there, skipping nights out, working overtime, and driving an old car that sounded like a dying lawnmower. When I finally signed the papers, it felt like breathing for the first time. Freedom, stability, my own space. I should have known it wouldn't stay that way for long, because nothing I owned ever stayed mine once Leah found out about it. It started small. I'd post a photo of my backyard garden or the kitchen remodel online, and she'd comment things like, "So proud of my brother living the dream." It looked supportive, but she always followed it up with, "Guess I'll move in soon, huh?" I'd laugh it off, but the more she said it, the less like a joke it felt, especially when Dad started echoing her. One night over dinner, he casually said, "You've got 3 bedrooms, right? Seems like a waste for just one person." I knew where that was going, so I brushed it off. "I like my space," I said. But that wasn't the end of it. Dad had this way of planting an idea and watering it until it sprouted into an obligation. Leah's fresh start talk began about 6 months later. She'd just gone through another breakup, this time with some guy she'd met online and moved in with after 3 weeks. It ended how you'd expect. He kicked her out, kept the furniture she'd bought on credit, and left her broke. She called Dad crying, saying she had nowhere to go. I didn't even know about it until he showed up at my house one Sunday morning without calling first. I was halfway through mowing the lawn when his car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, hands in his jacket pockets, that look of fatherly concern that always meant he wanted something. "Nolan," he started, his voice softer than usual. "We need to talk about Leah." I killed the mower and wiped the sweat from my forehead, already feeling the tension build. "What about her?" I asked. He sighed like I was being difficult. "She's not in a good place right now. You know how hard she's had it. I just think she needs a fresh start. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe." I leaned against the mower handle. "And you're suggesting, what exactly?" He hesitated, but not long enough. "Well, you've got the space. Maybe she could stay here, just until she gets back on her feet." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Dad, she's 30. She's been getting back on her feet since high school." His expression hardened immediately. "That's not fair. She's been through a lot." "We all have," I said quietly. He didn't like that answer. "I'm not asking you to adopt her, Nolan. I'm asking you to do the right thing as her brother." That line hit me the wrong way. The right thing. I'd done the right thing my entire life. Studying, working, saving, helping out when Leah couldn't pay her phone bill. Every time I said yes, it only bought me a few weeks of peace before the next favor came around. I told him I'd think about it, which was my polite way of saying no. He didn't push further that day, but I knew it wasn't over. When Dad wanted something, he'd keep circling back until you gave in. Sure enough, a few days later, Leah called me. "Hey, big bro, how's my favorite homeowner?" Her voice was sweet, practiced. I could almost hear Dad in the background coaching her. "What's up, Leah?" I asked. "So," she began, dragging the word out like she was easing into something big. "Dad told me you might have some extra space. I've been looking for a new place, but the rental prices are insane right now. Maybe I could crash with you for a while. I kept my tone even. Leah, I like my privacy. I've worked hard to have my own space. There was a pause. Then, she sighed dramatically. Wow, I didn't expect that from you. I mean, after everything I've been through, I bit my tongue, because the last time she said that, it ended with me co-signing a loan she never paid back. I'm sorry, I said, but it's not a good time. She got quiet, then said coldly, You know, Dad always said you only care about yourself. And that was that, the guilt trip. I hung up before it could go any further. I tried to shake it off, but a pit formed in my stomach. I knew she'd go running to Dad, twisting the story until I looked like the villain. And I was right. 2 days later, I got another surprise visit. This time, Dad didn't bother pretending to be calm. He stormed into my house without even waiting for me to invite him in. Unbelievable, he said, pacing the living room. Your sister's in tears, and you're sitting here acting like some kind of landlord. I stood there, frozen, watching him unravel. She's not homeless, I said. She has options. She's your sister, he barked. Family helps family. I felt something snap inside me. Funny, I said, because family never helped me. That stopped him for a second. His jaw tightened. That's different. You never needed help. Because I worked for everything, I shot back. While enough, he snapped. You're being selfish. If your mother were here, she'd agree with me. I interrupted. His face went pale. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke, quieter but sharper. You know what? I'm disappointed in you. I thought I raised you better than this. He left after that, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd stood, wondering how it always came to this. Leah in trouble, Dad furious at me for not fixing it. I didn't hear from either of them for almost a week. Then came the text that made my blood boil. We've decided Leah's moving in. It's the right thing to do. Be reasonable. We've decided. Like I didn't even exist in the equation. That was the first moment I felt something shift, a quiet anger that burned low but steady. I wasn't just the afterthought anymore. I was the obstacle. And something told me that if I didn't draw the line now, I'd lose everything I'd built. What I didn't know yet was that Leah wasn't just freeloading anymore. She'd crossed a line even Dad couldn't ignore, and soon, I'd have the proof in my hands. Proof that would make him question everything he thought he knew about his golden child. I didn't reply to Dad's text. I wanted to. I typed out at least half a dozen versions, some calm, some angry, some sarcastic, but nothing felt right. I deleted them all and went quiet instead. I figured if I ignored it long enough, he'd cool off. But that wasn't how things worked in my family. When Leah wanted something, silence wasn't an obstacle. It was an invitation for her to push harder. A few days later, I came home from work and saw her car parked in my driveway. A beat-up silver hatchback I recognized immediately, stuffed with boxes and clothes spilling out from the back seat. My heart sank. I didn't even make it out of the car before she stepped onto the porch with that practiced, innocent smile, waving like she was greeting an old friend instead of an unwanted roommate. Surprise, she said, like this was some kind of joke. I got out slowly, trying to stay calm. What are you doing here? She tilted her head. Dad said you agreed I could stay. Didn't he tell you? I clenched my jaw. No, he didn't. And I didn't agree to anything. Her expression changed instantly. Wow, she said, voice dripping with mock hurt. I didn't realize you were going to make this difficult. I thought we were family. I wanted to tell her to pack up and leave. Every bone in my body was telling me to. But then she started crying, loud, performative sobs like something out of a soap opera. I have nowhere to go, she said, sniffling dramatically. Everything I owned is in my car. Please, Nolan, just a week or two. I'll be gone before you know it. It would have been easier if I didn't see the neighbors watching from across the street. It looked bad, a grown man refusing to let his crying sister inside. So I sighed, rubbed the back of my neck, and said, fine. A week. That's it. She wiped her tears immediately. You're the best, she said, already walking inside without waiting for me. That's how it started, the slow, painful unraveling of my peace. At first, she acted grateful. She'd make breakfast, clean the kitchen, laugh at my jokes. But it didn't last. Within a few days, she started forgetting to do her dishes. Then her stuff began creeping out of the guest room. Makeup on the bathroom counter, shoes by the front door, clothes draped over the couch. She started treating my home like a hotel she didn't have to pay for. And then came the guests. I came home one Friday night after a long shift to find 3 of her friends in the living room drinking wine and blasting music. My living room. My speakers. I froze at the door. One of them, a guy in a hoodie, waved a bottle at me. "Hey man, you must be Leah's brother." Leah looked up, smiling like nothing was wrong. "You're home early," she said, as if I was the intruder. "Leah, what is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Just a small get-together," she said. "You said you'd be home late. I didn't say you could invite people over." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so uptight. It's my first weekend off in forever." I glanced at the half-empty bottles on the coffee table and the cigarette smoke wafting from the open window. "I want them out," I said quietly. Her friends went silent. Leah stared at me like she couldn't believe I was serious. "You're unbelievable," she said finally. "You can't stand to see me happy, can you? Leah, this is my house." She stood up and crossed her arms. "Yeah, well, maybe you should try being less of a control freak." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just walked over, picked up one of the wine glasses, and set it down on the counter. "Everyone out. Now." She glared at me, but eventually, they left, muttering under their breath as they went. The door shut behind them, and for a moment there was silence. Then Leo exploded. "You ruined my night. Do you know how embarrassing that was? You treat me like some kind of child." I turned to her, tired and angry. "If you acted like an adult, I wouldn't have to." That was the night she stopped pretending to be grateful. After that, it became a war of small battles. She'd forget to pay for groceries. She'd blast music late at night. She even borrowed my car once without asking. I found out when I noticed the fuel tank nearly empty. Every time I confronted her, she'd twist it around. "You're overreacting," she'd say. "It's just a car." Or, "Relax, it's just music." And every time she got caught, she'd call Dad. It was like clockwork. Within an hour, I'd get a call or text. "She's your sister. Stop being so harsh on her." Or, "You've always been too strict, Nolan. She's trying her best." Her best. That phrase started to make my skin crawl. 2 weeks turned into a month. Then 2. Every time I brought up the deadline, Leah found a new excuse. "I'm waiting to hear back about a job. I just need to save for a deposit. It's only a few more weeks." Then one evening, she dropped the mask entirely. I came home and found her sitting at the kitchen table with Dad. They were having coffee in my kitchen, and from the way they both looked at me, I knew this wasn't a friendly visit. "Nolan," Dad began, his tone stiff but calm. "We need to talk." I stayed standing. "If this is about Leah moving out, it's about Leah staying," he interrupted. I blinked. "Excuse me. She's been through a lot. You've got the space. It's not fair to push her out when she's trying to get her life together." I laughed, genuinely stunned. "Dad, I gave her 2 months. 2. She's not even looking for a job. She sleeps until noon and throws parties." Leah frowned. "That's not true. I've been helping around the house." "Helping?" I snapped. "You use my car, my food, my electricity. Stop." Dad barked, standing now. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you talk to your sister like that." I stared at him. "You're defending her again. You always do." "She deserves a fresh start," he said firmly. "She's had bad luck. You should be proud to help family." "Proud?" I asked quietly. "You want me to be proud that she's freeloading off me?" "Watch your tone," he warned. Something inside me broke then. I'd spent years biting my tongue, avoiding conflict, trying to earn approval that never came. And here he was, in my house, telling me I owed more to someone who had never lifted a finger for anyone but herself. "Dad," I said slowly, "if you think she deserves this house more than I do, then maybe you should buy her one." He stared at me for a long moment. Then his voice dropped low. "You don't talk to me like that. Not after everything I've done for you." I felt my pulse pounding. "What exactly have you done for me, Dad? You bailed her out 100 times, but you never once helped me when I was struggling." He didn't respond. He just grabbed his jacket, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. Leah followed, glaring at me on her way out. That night, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe they'd both stay away for a while. But I underestimated how deep their bond ran. The next morning, my front door was unlocked. My stomach dropped as I realized someone had been inside. I walked in to find boxes stacked in the hallway again, Leah's things. All of them. She was moving back in. And taped to the fridge was a note in Dad's handwriting. Do the right thing. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that note, but something inside me went cold. They weren't just asking anymore. They were taking. From that point on, Leah treated the house like it was hers. She rearranged furniture, threw out my food because she didn't like the smell, even started getting mail delivered to my address. I told her to stop, but she just smiled and said, "Relax, you're being paranoid." One afternoon, while she was out, I went through the kitchen drawers to find some receipts for my renovation expenses. Instead, I found something that made my blood run cold: a stack of unopened letters from Dad's bank, addressed to him but delivered here. She must have been having his mail redirected. I opened one out of curiosity and froze. It was a notice about unauthorized transfers. Large sums, hundreds, sometimes thousands, being pulled from his account. My first thought was that he was being scammed. But then I saw the signature on one of the authorization forms. Leah's. I stared at it for a long time, the reality settling like ice in my stomach. She wasn't just mooching off me, she was stealing from him. And when I realized that he'd been threatening to disown me for not giving her my house, while she'd been draining his bank account behind his back, that's when I knew things were about to explode. Because for the first time in my life, I had proof, real, undeniable proof, that his golden child wasn't who he thought she was. And the next move I made would change everything for our family forever. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my kitchen table with those bank letters spread out in front of me, reading them over and over until the words started blurring together. Every transaction, every forged signature, it all spelled out the truth I'd known deep down for years but had never been able to prove. Leah wasn't just entitled. She was dangerous. The first withdrawal was small, $150 here, $200 there, but then the amounts started climbing. $500, $1,200, $2,000, all pulled over the course of a few months, all authorized under Dad's name. I couldn't believe it at first. Maybe there was some mistake? Maybe he'd given her permission and just forgotten to tell me? But then I saw the note scrawled on one of the envelopes. "Don't tell Dad. I'll fix it later." It was in Leah's handwriting. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My sister, the one Dad had defended with every ounce of his pride, was stealing from him. And he had no idea. I thought about calling him right away. My hand even hovered over my phone. But then I stopped, because I knew how that conversation would go. He wouldn't believe me. He'd tell me I was misinterpreting things, that I was trying to turn him against her. He'd protect her before he even saw the evidence. That was just how it had always been. So I waited. I started collecting everything. Every bank letter, every email notification, even the small sticky notes she left lying around that hinted at what she was doing. I made copies, photographed them, put them in a folder labeled "House Repairs," and tucked it away in my office drawer. Meanwhile, Leah carried on like nothing had happened. She sang in the kitchen, blasted music while getting ready, and posted filtered selfies in my living room with captions like, "New chapter, new me." It was surreal, like watching a storm build while everyone around you insists it's just a breeze. Dad kept calling too. His tone had softened since our last fight, but the guilt-tripping hadn't stopped. "Son," he said one evening over the phone, "I know things have been tense, but you need to let go of this resentment. Leah's trying." "Is she?" I asked quietly. "Yes," he said. "She told me she's been helping you out around the house, cleaning, cooking." I almost laughed. "Dad, she doesn't even wash her own dishes." There was a pause. "You've always been hard on her, Nolan. You need to learn forgiveness." I clenched my jaw. Forgiveness and stupidity aren't the same thing. He sighed. "One day you'll understand what family really means." When he hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something shift inside me. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn that man's approval. I'd bent over backward, kept quiet, played the good son. But at that moment, I realized it didn't matter how good I was. He'd always see what he wanted to see. And what he wanted was his perfect daughter, even if she was burning the family down behind his back. That was the moment I stopped trying to win him over. The next few weeks were quiet, but tense. Leah was getting bolder. She started intercepting the mail before I got home. She even asked once, casually, "Hey, do you check your own mail every day? You know, for security and stuff." The way she said it made my skin crawl. I played dumb and shrugged. "Nah, never anything important." But I started checking my mailbox every morning before work instead of after. That's how I found the final piece of proof. A letter from the bank stating that a joint savings account had been opened in Dad's name and another signer, Leah M. Carter. My heart sank as I read it. She wasn't just taking money. She'd built an entire system to funnel it. That night, I made a copy of the letter, tucked it into my growing evidence folder, and decided it was time to do something I should have done a long time ago. Take back control of my own life. The first step was getting Leah out. I stopped cooking for her, stopped cleaning up her messes. When she asked where her favorite snacks were, I said, "You live here. Go buy them." I started locking my office door. She noticed quickly. "What's with the sudden boundaries?" she said one afternoon, smirking as she leaned against my doorframe. "Afraid I'll steal your precious pencils?" "No," I said evenly. "I just value my privacy." Her smirk faltered for a split second before she shrugged. "You're being weird lately." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm still paying the bills." She rolled her eyes and walked off, muttering something under her breath. But she knew something had changed. The leash she'd been yanking for years wasn't tightening anymore. Around that time, I started putting more energy into work. I'm a systems analyst for a small firm, not glamorous, but steady. I'd always done my job well, but now I started pushing harder, volunteering for extra projects, staying late, not because I needed to, but because it gave me a sense of purpose that home didn't. Within a couple of months, my boss noticed. I got a raise, small but meaningful. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my effort actually mattered somewhere. At home, though, things were falling apart fast. Leah's behavior turned spiteful. She accidentally left the freezer door open, ruining all my groceries. She used my Netflix account to rent movies on my credit card. Once, she even unplugged my Wi-Fi router while I was in a meeting because the signal was better in the living room. Every time she pulled something new, I reminded myself, just hold out a little longer. Because I had a plan forming in the back of my mind, a way to expose her without giving her any warning. But before I could act, things took a sharp turn. One Friday night, Dad called, his voice unsteady. "Nolan," he said, "I just checked my account. There's money missing. Thousands." I kept my tone neutral. "Missing?" "Yes. I don't understand it. The bank says I must have approved some transfers, but I didn't. They even showed me a signature, and it looks," he paused. "It looks like Leah's." My stomach tightened. "Dad, listen," he cut me off. "No, I don't want to believe it. She wouldn't do that. There must be some mistake." I hesitated, then said quietly, "Come by tomorrow. I have something you need to see." When I hung up, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. The storm was coming, but this time, I wasn't afraid. That night, Leah came home late. She was humming, tossing her purse on the counter, scrolling through her phone. "You're up late," she said. "So are you." She looked at me, then laughed lightly. "Okay, weird vibe. Did I forget to do the dishes again?" I stared at her for a moment, the weight of everything pressing against my chest. "You might want to get some sleep," I said. "Dad's coming over tomorrow." Her smile faltered. "What for?" I didn't answer. The next morning, Dad showed up early. Leah wasn't even awake yet. He came in looking pale and tired. The same man who'd once lectured me about respect, now clutching his coffee like it was keeping him upright. "Nolan," he said quietly, "tell me what's going on." I led him to the kitchen table where I'd laid out every piece of evidence in neat rows. Letters, copies, screenshots. He stared at them, his eyes moving slowly over each page. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something darker. Grief, maybe. "This can't be right," he murmured. "She wouldn't." "Look at the signatures," I said gently. "They're all her handwriting." He sank into a chair. For the first time, he looked small, vulnerable, like a man realizing the foundation he'd built his life on was starting to crumble. Before either of us could say more, Leah walked in wearing pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice groggy but cautious. Dad looked up at her, eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Anger, yes, but also heartbreak. "Leah," he said softly, "sit down." She froze, glancing between us. "Why? What's going on?" "Now," he said, his tone sharp. The air in the room turned electric. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Leah sat slowly, eyes darting toward the papers spread across the table. When she saw her own handwriting staring back at her, she went pale. "Dad, I can explain," she started, but her voice cracked. He slammed his hand on the table. "Explain what?" "How you've been stealing from me." "I wasn't stealing," she shouted. "You said I could use the money. I said you could borrow a little, not drain my account." Her face twisted into something cold. "You've always given everything to him," she yelled, pointing at me. "I just wanted what's fair." And just like that, the entire house came crashing down around us. Years of resentment, favoritism, and denial, all spilling out into the open. But here's the strange part. Even as they screamed, even as the family I'd known fell apart in front of me, I felt calm. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't backing down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one sitting in the corner, taking the blame. I was standing in the wreckage, watching it burn, and realizing I was finally free. That was the day everything changed. Dad didn't speak to me for a week after that. He was processing, I guess. Leah packed her things that night, slamming doors and muttering curses, but I didn't stop her. When the door shut behind her for the last time, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. The days that followed were strange. I expected to feel guilty, maybe even lonely. But I didn't. I felt lighter. I started going for walks after work, listening to music I liked, cooking actual meals instead of microwaving leftovers. My house started to feel like home again. Dad still didn't call, but I didn't chase him. I focused on rebuilding, emotionally, financially, even socially. I caught up with friends I hadn't seen in ages, poured energy into my job, and started setting real boundaries for the first time in my life. It wasn't easy. There were nights I still replayed everything in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. But every time I passed Leah's empty room, I reminded myself I'd done what needed to be done. I thought the worst was behind me. But a month later, I got a call from Dad. His voice was tight, brittle. "Nolan," he said, "we need to talk. It's about Leah." And from the tone in his voice, I knew something was coming. Something that would drag all of us back into the storm I thought I'd finally escaped. When Dad called that day, his voice didn't sound like the man who'd once barked orders across the dinner table or lectured me about family loyalty. It was fragile, cracked in a way that told me he'd spent the last few nights awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment he'd defended Leah over me. "Nolan," he said quietly, "we need to talk. It's about your sister." Those 5 words hit me like a stone. I didn't ask for details. I just told him to come by. When we hung up, I sat there staring at my reflection in the blank TV screen, realizing I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in years, I held the upper hand, not out of manipulation or guilt, but out of truth. Cold, undeniable truth. When he arrived later that afternoon, he looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. His posture slumped, his eyes dull, his usual confidence gone. "She drained more accounts," he said as soon as he stepped inside. "She used my card again, after everything." I didn't say, "I told you so." I just handed him a cup of coffee and let him talk. "She's asking for help again," he muttered bitterly. "Says she's sorry. Says she'll pay it back once she gets on her feet." "But Nolan," he looked up at me with that hollow expression I'd never seen on him before. "She's not getting back on her feet this time, is she?" "No," I said quietly. "She's not." He nodded slowly, like the truth finally weighed enough to crush denial. And for the first time in my life, he apologized. "I should have listened to you sooner." It wasn't much, but it was something. A small crack in the armor of the man who'd never admitted fault. I thought maybe, just maybe, things would finally start healing. But that wasn't how my family worked. Because the thing about people like Leah, they don't disappear quietly. She called him later that evening while he was still at my house. I could hear her voice through his phone speaker, soft and desperate. "Dad, please. I messed up, okay? I just need some time. Please don't shut me out." He didn't answer at first. His jaw tightened, his eyes closed. Then he said, "You stole from me, Leah." "It wasn't stealing," she cried. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed help." He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You've said that before." Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "It's not fair, Dad. You gave him everything. He doesn't deserve that house." "I do." I saw something flicker behind my father's eyes, a mixture of anger and heartbreak, and I realized Leah hadn't learned a thing. She wasn't remorseful. She was jealous. Even after getting caught red-handed, her instinct was to take more. When he hung up, he looked at me, defeated. "She's gone off the deep end." "Then stop trying to save her," I said quietly. "Let her face the consequences." He didn't respond. But he didn't defend her, either. That silence told me he knew I was right. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear much from either of them. Dad retreated into himself, avoiding calls and visits. Leah vanished completely. No texts, no social media updates, nothing. But I knew her. She was too proud to disappear forever. She was licking her wounds, waiting for the next opportunity to reappear and manipulate her way back into comfort. And I decided that when she did, I'd be ready. That's when the plan started forming. Not revenge for the sake of anger, but justice. A quiet correction of years of imbalance. I began by setting things right in my own life. I sold the old car she'd borrowed without permission and bought a used SUV that I kept locked and tracked. I changed the locks on my doors, set up security cameras, and finally, removed her forwarding address from my mailbox. I cleaned out every trace of her from the house. It wasn't just about safety. It was symbolic. Every item I threw out, her chipped mug, her old hairbrush, the half-empty bottles of perfume, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Meanwhile, I started digging. I wanted to know how far her financial mess went, not out of curiosity, but because I knew she'd come crawling back, and I needed to be ready. Through a contact at the bank, an old coworker from college, I managed to get access to some of the public legal filings related to her accounts. It was worse than I expected. Multiple overdrafts, credit card debt in the tens of thousands, even a pending notice from a payday loan service. Leah wasn't just broke. She was imploding. Then, 2 months after the confrontation, I got a call from an unknown number. "Nolan," the voice said shakily. It was her. I didn't respond. "Please don't hang up," she said quickly. "I need your help." I sat down, letting the silence stretch. "What do you want?" "I'm in trouble," she said. I got evicted. I don't have anywhere to go. Dad won't even pick up the phone. Please, I'll do anything. Just let me stay for a little while." The old me would have caved. The one who felt responsible for holding the family together, who couldn't stand to see anyone cry. But not this time. I let her talk, desperate, stumbling over excuses and apologies. And the longer she spoke, the clearer it became that she didn't feel guilt, only fear of losing her safety net. When she paused for breath, I finally said, "You stole from Dad. I told you. I was going to pay him back. You forged his signature." She went quiet. "You've lied to him your entire life?" I continued. "And now you want me to clean it up for you again?" "I just need a place to stay," she whispered. "Please. I'll find a job." No," I said firmly. "You won't." She went silent for a long time. Then her tone changed, colder, sharper. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I just learned." When I hung up, I felt something final click into place. The years of guilt, obligation, and frustration all crystallized into something steady, resolve. I wasn't going to let her drag us down again. But more importantly, I wasn't going to let her keep manipulating Dad. So I called him. "Dad," I said, "she's going to come to you next." He sighed. "She already has. She showed up at my place last night." My stomach tightened. "What did you do?" "I told her no," he said. For the first time, I told her no. That should have been comforting. But I knew Leah too well. She wouldn't just walk away. She'd find another angle. Maybe play the victim, maybe twist the story. That's when I decided to set things in motion. If she wanted to play games, I'd build the board myself. I spent the next week preparing. I met with Dad again, this time to go over his finances with him properly. We closed the compromised accounts, opened new ones under secure names, and set up notifications for every transaction. I helped him draft a letter to his bank, formally confirming the forgery and protecting him from liability. Then I went a step further. I reached out to an attorney, a quiet, meticulous man named Reeves who handled small civil disputes. I told him everything. He listened carefully, asked for the evidence, and after reviewing it, said, "If she tries to touch another cent of his money, she'll face legal consequences. We can make that happen." That was exactly what I wanted, not revenge in the traditional sense, but accountability. But I wasn't done. Because I knew Leah wasn't going to stop at Dad. She'd eventually turn her focus back to me. Maybe not immediately, but when her next scheme fell apart. And when she did, I wanted her to realize she couldn't manipulate her way out this time. So I started gathering more, not just financial evidence, but personal. Screenshots of her social media posts bragging about winning, arguments, photos from the parties she'd thrown while claiming she was struggling, even messages she'd sent mutual friends twisting the story to make me look cruel. Each piece went into a folder on my computer labeled restoration. Because that's what this was. Not destruction, restoration. By the time I was done, I had a complete record, a digital reflection of who Leah really was. And deep down, I knew the day would come when I'd need to use it. That day came sooner than expected. Dad called one morning, his voice tense again. "She's threatening me," he said. "She said if I don't give her access to my savings, she'll go to the police. She's claiming I gave her permission for the transfers." I felt my blood pressure spike. "She's blackmailing you?" He hesitated. "She didn't say it outright, but she's implying I'm covering up something." That was the final straw. "Don't talk to her again," I said firmly. "Let me handle it." I hung up, opened my laptop, and pulled up the restoration folder. Every piece of evidence, every lie, every theft, all neatly organized. I wasn't sure yet how I'd use it, but I knew exactly where to start. Because Leah had built her whole life on lies, and I'd just spent months collecting the truth. Now, all that was left was to decide when and how to let it out. When I finally decided to act, it wasn't out of anger anymore. It was out of clarity. I'd spent months living with the weight of their choices, and now that I had the truth, I wasn't going to scream or throw accusations. I was going to do what Leah never expected. I was going to outthink her. The first step was simple: let her talk. Leah thrived on manipulation. The more she talked, the more rope she gave herself. So when she texted me out of the blue, "We need to fix this before Dad ruins everything," I didn't ignore her. I replied, "Okay, let's meet." We arranged to meet at Dad's house that weekend. I didn't tell him at first. I wanted her to walk in thinking she was still in control. She arrived looking nervous but defiant, wearing that same mask she'd used all her life, the fragile victim with fire behind her eyes. "Thanks for seeing me," she said as she stepped inside. "Dad's been acting insane. He thinks I stole from him again. But I swear, Nolan, this is all a misunderstanding." I let her talk. She spun her story like she always did. That she'd been helping Dad pay bills, that the signatures were old permissions, that the bank was confused. She even threw in a few lines about how he was losing it and not himself lately. It was textbook Leah. Discredit the other person before they can defend themselves. When she finally paused for breath, I said, "You're right. It's good we're clearing this up." Her eyes lit up with relief. Too soon. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and set it on the table. "But before we do, I think you should see something." She frowned, reaching for it cautiously. Inside were copies of everything: the forged documents, the account statements, the screenshots, even the photo of the note she'd written that said, "Don't tell Dad." I watched her face change as she flipped through the pages. Confusion, then panic, then a flicker of anger. "What is this supposed to be?" she snapped. "Proof," I said quietly. "Of what?" "Everything you've done." Before she could respond, the door behind her opened. Dad stepped in. He'd been waiting in the next room the whole time. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were steady. "Leah," he said, "sit down." She froze. "You set me up?" she whispered, turning toward me. I didn't answer. Dad took the seat across from her, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You've lied to me for years. You've stolen from me, from your brother. I gave you chance after chance." She started crying, the kind of tears meant to manipulate, not mourn. I was desperate. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said. "I'm done being your excuse." He slid an envelope across the table, the official notice from his lawyer. "These are the documents closing your access to every account in my name. The police already have copies of the bank reports. If you contact me or Nolan again, it will be through an attorney." Her eyes went wide. "You're turning on your own daughter?" Dad's voice didn't waver. "I'm protecting what's left of my family." She looked at me, eyes burning with betrayal. "You did this. You think you're so righteous, don't you? You've always wanted to see me fail." I met her gaze steadily. "No," I said. "I just wanted to stop cleaning up your mess." She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. "You'll regret this," she hissed, pointing at both of us. "You think I won't survive without you? You'll see." Then she was gone. The door slammed behind her, and for a long time, there was silence. I half expected Dad to break down, but he didn't. He just sat there, shoulders heavy but steady, like a man who'd finally put down a weight he'd been carrying for too long. After a moment, he looked at me. "You saved me," he said quietly. "And I don't just mean the money." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. In the weeks that followed, Leah tried everything: angry texts, tearful voicemails, even messages from mutual friends claiming she'd changed. Neither of us responded. When she realized we weren't giving in, she tried one last desperate move. She filed a police report claiming Dad had given her access to his accounts voluntarily and then turned on her when she used them. But the evidence I'd collected was airtight. The bank's fraud department confirmed the forged signatures, and her messages contradicted her own story. The case turned against her almost immediately. She wasn't arrested. Dad didn't want that. But the legal warnings and penalties were enough to freeze her credit and close her accounts. Her name became mud in every circle she'd relied on. No one wanted to lend her money. No one wanted to co-sign leases, and her social media slowly went silent. For the first time, Leah had to face a world that didn't bend for her. Dad and I, meanwhile, started rebuilding, awkwardly at first. The trust between us wasn't restored overnight, but there was peace in our conversations now. He came over for dinner sometimes, and we'd talk about small things: work, sports, the garden, the things we never used to make time for. One night, a few months later, he looked around my kitchen and said, "You've really made this place yours." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "It finally feels like home." He nodded thoughtfully, then added, "I used to think the right thing was always keeping family close, no matter what. But sometimes the right thing is letting go." That stuck with me. The following year was the best I'd had in a long time. I got promoted again, started volunteering at a local mentorship program for teens learning finance. Maybe because I wanted to help someone avoid growing up like I did, fighting for fairness in a house that didn't know what it meant. Dad came to my place for Thanksgiving that year. We sat down to eat, just the two of us, and it felt right. No chaos, no guilt, just quiet gratitude. He raised his glass. "To peace," he said. I lifted mine. "To finally doing the right thing." We laughed, genuinely this time. And as I looked around my house, I realized how far we'd come. The silence that once haunted the walls was gone. In its place was calm, freedom, and somewhere out there, I knew Leah was probably still blaming everyone but herself. But that didn't matter anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't living in her shadow or Dad's expectations. I was just living. In the end, the best revenge wasn't ruining her life. It was rebuilding mine. And when I locked my door that night, I finally felt what I'd been chasing for years. Not victory, not vindication, but peace that no one could take away again.